Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on a very hot topic on accounts payable outsourcing and the keys for a successful implementation. As a way of introduction, my name is Fabiana, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Auxis. And as a quick reminder for all attendees before we get started, as you can probably see, your lines are muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them through the question panel bar that you're going to see in the corner of your screen, and we will make sure to ask those questions to both Eric and Dan, whether through the discussion, at the end of the discussion, and if by any chance we don't get time to go through all of the questions, we will make sure to reach out to you later and schedule a more private discussion to answer those questions. So with that, I'm sure we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to turn it over to both Eric and Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabi, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Accounts Payable Outsourcing on the Rise, the Keys to Successful Implementation. My name is Eric Libros, and our firm Auxis provides management consulting and outsourcing services to mid to large enterprise companies across a broad range of industries. I run the company's business transformation practice, which really focuses on helping companies achieve higher levels of performance, cost effectiveness, and just overall efficiency in their business operations. We accomplish it through various service lines, which include shared services, advisory and implementation services, process redesign and automation, restructuring of organizations, as well as business process outsourcing through our service center in Costa Rica. I'm joined today by my associate, Dan Day, and I will let him introduce himself. Dan?
Thank you, Eric. And first, I'd like to welcome everybody on the call, and thank you for taking some time to join us today. My name is Dan Day. I lead the BPO practice here at Auxis. In my role, I've spent the last 10 years or so advising CFOs and other key leaders on how to achieve peak performance in their back office, either through standing up a shared service, introducing automation and performance management programs, or outsourcing. I also lead the BPO practice here at Auxis. Our practice offers a wide range of services, including the entire finance and accounting suite, which includes accounting and month-end close, accounts receivable, and accounts payable, which we're here to talk about today. We also offer a full range of back office services, including customer service, help desk, and HR services, all delivered through our nearshore center in Costa Rica. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. And with that said, I know time is valuable, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to Eric, who will kick us off today. Go ahead, Eric.
Great, thanks, Dan. So let's cover what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start by talking about some recent market trends and how we've seen this really drive the increase of finance outsourcing across a broad spectrum. Obviously a lot of the different events of the last year and a half have had a huge impact on business operations. And one of the things we're seeing is a stronger interest in outsourcing as a strategic alternative. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about how Latin America has emerged as a destination for finance services, and really what that means in terms of operational impact, cost savings, et cetera, and how it compares to the previously established offshore model that's Asia-based. And then we're going to dive into the AP function and talk about first how to benchmark your AP organization and understand how to identify where the opportunities are, and then within that, what are the best candidate activities for outsourcing, and really what you might want to retain within that function. And then we'll go into some of the tools and technologies that will help drive some of the performance, some key lessons learned for how to make a successful program of outsourcing with a partner, and share some of our real world success stories of how this has worked successfully for clients that we've worked with. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. But let's get started. So clearly the last year and a half has had a huge impact on business operations, and a lot of things have changed. But what's happened is businesses have had to adapt to a variety of different changes in their organization, whether it's work from home, whether it's changing roles and responsibilities, whether it's how you interact with customers or suppliers. A lot of these things have really had a tremendous impact on business, and we're seeing it in the results of what finance executives are essentially talking about as they go into this year and then looking beyond that. So one of the interesting points is that in a recent survey, finance executives have basically said that standardization and process efficiency has become their top strategic objective in 2021, knocking out reducing cost into the #2 spot. Reducing costs has historically been the #1 driver for finance executives pretty much over year. But now what we're seeing, and particularly in light of the events of the last year and a half in the pandemic and needs to shift your operations and get more efficient because of the fact that people are not sitting in the office, getting the process down to a much more efficient approach has been key and critical to business executives. And we're seeing that also in the way how finance tasks are becoming much more automated than you've previously seen, and it's really coming at us fast. As you can see from this statistic from a recent survey, 60% of traditional finance tasks are now considered automated, which is up from just a little bit more than a third just 3 years ago. So think about the dramatic change that's taken place in business operations over the last 3 years, and how finance has become the front line of digital transformation, with finance executives now being the ones driving that direction and really having the final say on how technology is going to be used across the enterprise. Now, of course, what this has done is created a change in how people work and the way people work and what they're focusing on. So another survey highlighted the fact that 75% of CFOs believe that their company needs to redesign the way people work and reinvent the culture to support some of these new behaviors and mindsets. How do you incorporate and integrate people who are working from home, who may never have been in the office in the first place, has become a challenge that finance executives and many other people across the enterprise have had to figure out solutions for. Now, while these changes have been taking place, a different set of challenges come along with them. So, historically, technology transformations are, frankly, dicey propositions. And this statistic of 30% of technology transformations being considered successful. This is not a new stat. This has been around since technology started making its presence felt in organizations. So it's definitely a challenge. But within that, 16% of organizations from a recent McKinsey survey said that digital transformation has only successfully improved their performance in a sustainable fashion across the business. 16%, so less than the 30%, is what we're seeing in terms of digital transformation, the ability to bring in technology and automate. Now, one of the challenges that is probably being driven by is the fact that a lot of the organizations are concerned about their ability to have the right talent in place to support these types of initiatives. So a third of CFOs have expressed concerns that the digital investments will not be fully realized because of the skills and competencies that may be lacking in their organization. And this is coupled with even a more general concern around talent within the organization. A recent study showed that finance and accounting roles were ranked 5th of all the hardest positions to fill in the US, with about a quarter of CEOs saying that lack of talent has really impacted their ability to get things done, delayed or even canceled strategic initiatives over the last year while this has been going on. So as you can see, trying to make these changes comes with a set of challenges that need to be addressed by the organization. Now, AP is an area that's really right in the middle of it, and it's definitely an area that's been considered very ripe for improvement, largely because of what I like to call the vicious cycle of manual work that really stays embedded within the AP function in many organizations. If you look at across a lot of organizations, what are you seeing? You're seeing a lack of standardized processes. Only 20% of AP organizations have standardized their processes at enterprise-wide, according to some recent survey data. And what is the result of this is still a lot of manual processing taking place and a high degree of exception rates, which cause organizations to spend extra time processing and also resolving issues within the process itself. This often can result in late payments to suppliers due to some of the inaccuracies of the invoices. Sometimes the data is coming in inaccurately from the supplier. Sometimes it's coming in, it's coming as a result of processing errors that are created. But at the end of the day, what's happening is the AP staff is spending about a quarter of their time just chasing down information and trying to figure out how to resolve an issue with an existing invoice or vendor statement. There's still a lot of paper within organizations. So if you can look at the statistic to the lower left, it talks about how 65% of bottom performing organizations still receive non-electronic invoices. That's paper for all of those who don't want to use the euphemism here. And 42% of companies are still making payments by check. So there's still a lot of paper flowing through organizations overall. And it's no surprise that what this ends up resulting in is very often a high turnover rate and a challenge in attracting and retaining talent within the AP function and really across finance overall. And this has a direct impact on your business in a lot of different ways. The inability to attract and retain talent means that more errors occur, more issues occur. You're constantly in training and development mode, and there's a cost which has been estimated to be between $15,000 and $20,000 to hire, replace, retain different levels of positions within the finance department. Another key issue that we see is just lack of operational visibility. Generally when we engage with companies, one of the first things we're asking about is some of their operational data. And often they don't have access to it or they don't have it handy. And when they do, they have to kind of dig it out and provide it for us. And what this is telling you is they're not looking at this data. So what they're not really seeing what's going on in their organization, and they don't have good visibility to how things are running in their organization. So things like the volume of invoices, the number of exceptions, how many duplicates am I paying? What's my DPO? All these type of statistics are not being actively managed by businesses, and this can have a direct impact on your working capital. It can even, if you're, for example, a distributor, have a direct impact on your revenue cycle as well. So all of these different things within AP are areas that really cry out for improvement and optimization and change. So as a result, we're seeing a lot of organizations looking at outsourcing as one way to kind of affect that change. Overall, finance and accounting outsourcing has been growing pretty steadily, but the P2P market specifically focused on the nearshore part of it, we've seen a direct growth of, or projected growth, I should say, of about 26% over the next 5 years. So we're seeing a lot of organizations saying, this is an area that I can outsource. I'm looking at specifically not just the offshore model, but even a nearshore model, which we'll talk more about what that means and what the benefits are, but it's definitely a growth area. And what companies are looking for when they make these changes are some of the drivers that you see here. The ability to scale the team faster, to basically ramp up as you need it when growth occurs, or conversely, the ability to ramp down and have flexibility in your staffing. Just the talent levels itself, the access to talent has become a premium issue in the US, and I speak to business executives all the time, and very often I hear talent now being one of the high issues that they're citing for concerns about the ability to run their operation effectively. And then just another big concern is the ability to kind of realign and refocus your current staff on other tasks that maybe have higher value to the business. So relieving the burden on staff, utilizing them more effectively. These are all key drivers that organizations are doing and citing why they're turning to outsourcing to help solve some of these issues. And interestingly enough, this coincides with some of the data that the attendees on the webinar, have cited as to some of your challenges. So if you kind of look at the data we've compiled when you filled out your registration form, starting with what are some of the main drivers that you're considering outsourcing for. Improving quality and automation has become #1 over cost, consistent with the data point I shared earlier. Freeing my team up, getting access to talent, all of these things are what people are saying, and what you're seeing is a lot more interest in outsourcing as a strategic solution, and a lot more organizations saying this is something I need to consider if I'm not already doing it. And with that, that brings us to our first polling question. So I'll turn that over to Fabiana.
Thank you, Eric. So yeah, our polling question is, what are the biggest challenges that are impacting your current AP operation? And you can select one, then more option. So manual processing causing errors, backlog, vendors on hold, lack of standardized processes, too many exceptions, cost of the operation, finding and retaining good talent, or poor visibility to metrics and performance. I'll give it a couple of more seconds for you guys to submit your questions, and I'll share the responses with you shortly. All right. We have like 70% of votes. I'll close it now. And so interesting enough, 70% are citing manual processing. The second one on the list is the poor visibility to performance, that's 40%. The third one is the lack of standardized processes with 33%, cost of the operation 27%, and finding and retaining good talent 17%.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and again, consistent to what we're seeing and hearing in those surveys and actually engaging with our clients is the fact that, you know, it's about process. It's about, you know, really driving performance and getting better understanding of what's going on in my operation. Cost is important, but it's not the number one factor anymore. You can't really lower your cost effectively if you're not fixing some of the issues that are impacting your ability to perform. That's what we're seeing with a lot of people. So as we've talked about, outsourcing has become a much more strategic alternative to businesses, and they're really looking at it hard as a way to solve some of the issues that we've been discussing. Now, there's different types of outsourcing, and there's I'm going to kind of talk through that and really what's led to the rise in nearshoring as a big part of the solution that people are looking at. So there's what I like to call traditional outsourcing and what I like to call outsourcing that works. So traditional outsourcing is driven by labor arbitrage. You're just looking to lower your cost. If you kind of understand what outsourcing gives you, that cost savings is a given. You're going to get some degree of cost savings, but it shouldn't be the sole driver. It has to be about more than that to really get the benefits of what you're looking for. So very often it's going to be about not just cost, but how do I optimize and improve my operation and bring in some of the best-in-class technologies, best practices, and other solutions to drive performance in the organization. Outsourcing that works helps you enable those technologies, implement those technologies, and have it be part of your solution within your operation itself. In the traditional outsourcing model, you hear often concerns about quality, about what I like to call the black box, which is essentially lack of control. Things go in, things come out, and you have no visibility to what's going on the inside. But in a true outsourcing that works model, which I believe is really being enabled by a nearshore approach, it's much more collaborative. You're working together in the same time zones. You're sharing work schedules, holiday schedules, even the ability to get to the different operations for clients to come into, you know, into the outsourcer's operation or the outsourcers to spend time in the client's operation. Nearshore makes that a much easier proposition than trying to do it when you have to travel halfway around the world. So the collaboration, the communication, the proximity, these are all key drivers of the nearshoring option, and really why people are looking at it hard as a value add to the solution of outsourcing itself. And so let's talk about what that really means in terms of what businesses are looking for. So if you're sitting in the US or North America, nearshore basically means Latin America. If you're sitting in Europe, it's really not nearshore. Now it's going to be an Eastern European option. So the option of Asia, which has been the most common and longest standing solution for outsourcing, is typically gives you the lowest cost, typically will provide a range of the services, but the challenges that people face generally have to do with time zone, with geographic proximity. Sometimes there's cultural and language issues. So when you look at Latin America as a solution set, what are you really talking about? What are you getting? Well, you're getting that geographic proximity. You know, typically if you're looking at nearshore, It shouldn't take more than 4 or 5 hours from where you are in North America to get to a location in Latin America. Yes, there are some that are further, but it's not. A lot of the nearshore locations tend to be closer. You're definitely not dealing with the time zone issues. They're going to be in a very similar time zone to what you're working with. There is available a large and very experienced workforce. So the talent is there. You have language skills that often complement the U.S. So you definitely have a strong level of English that's available in these different markets, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But also cultural affinity. There's a very similar cultural approach to both organizations, to both locations. You're going to get lower cost. It will not be as low cost as the Asia markets typically, but it will definitely be lower compared to the U.S. And another big benefit that's really come out and really demonstrated itself over the last year and a half is the infrastructure. So many of you maybe have read about or even experienced some of the challenges in the Asia markets as people had to shift to a work from home model. So the telecom, the infrastructure related to internet connectivity is very strong in the business centers, but as they had to shift into a work from home model, a lot of organizations were finding that the telecom infrastructure locally in residences were not nearly the capacity needed to support business operations, and sometimes not available at all. So it really impacted the ability to shift to work from home and make that happen. Whereas in Latin America, the infrastructure has really been rebuilt over the last 20 years. And so what you see in almost all of the Latin American countries is a very robust telecom infrastructure. There's fiber. There's a lot of what you're seeing, it's sometimes exceeding what we have here in the U.S. In some of the areas. So that's generally not an issue. And that's why Latin America has emerged over the last probably 10, 12 years as a major destination. About 28% of the top global outsourcing destinations is now considered in Latin America. So that's 7 or 8 out of the 25 are now there. And considering that this is the new region that's just coming online for outsourcing, that's pretty dramatic change that's occurred. And with that, I'll turn it to Dan to speak a little bit about Costa Rica.
Thanks, Eric. So while many of you may know about Costa Rica as a great spot to take a vacation or maybe to retire, it's also known in the industry as a great nearshore destination for corporate and business services. It's consistently ranked by the various publications and rating agencies as the top destination in Latin America. So why is that? Eric covered some of this about nearshore in general, but from a English proficiency and literacy rates, they're the highest in Latin America. Costa Rica has a really strong and consistent business services market. So the government decided several years ago to diversify the economy to be more than just farming and tourism. So they made major investments and partnered with a lot of the large multinationals to change, the educational system to where kind of the high school and the technical schools and the college degree programs were partnering with the large multinationals to really start preparing and educating students so that when they got to the workforce, they had a good mix of, internship sort of experience along with education that specifically prepares them to work, in the shared services industry. We talked about close proximity and time zone. Costa Rica is typically central time zone. For part of the year, it's mountain. So working very close to the U.S. from a time perspective, and because of that, they're just is very strong culturally. They have a real high affinity for U.S. culture. They're listening to U.S. music and following U.S. sports teams, and keeping tabs on the Kardashians or whatever pop culture trends are going on in the U.S. So from that perspective, not only from from understanding our culture, but understanding the business climate, because there is such a strong U.S. business multinational presence, with operations down in Costa Rica that they have experience working with. Finally, it's renowned globally as, from safe and stability. It's, one of the safer countries, and San Jose being one of the safest cities in Latin America. So what does that lead to? There's over 170, multinationals currently operating in Costa Rica. And if you look across the names, it's obviously large companies, US-based companies that you've heard of that are supporting, US operations, LATAM operations, and in some cases, global operations. So names like, Amazon, DHL, Baxter, Mondelez, some of the largest companies in the world, have decided to establish their back office support out of Costa Rica. And with that, I'll turn it over to Fabi for our next polling question.
Thank you, Dan. So yeah, after hearing a little bit about the benefits of nearshoring versus offshoring, we wanted to ask, how much do you agree that these benefits of nearshoring make outsourcing more appealing to you? A lot, somewhat, neutral, or not really? And I'll share with you the answers in a second. All right, so sharing the responses now. So a lot, 28%, somewhat, 44%, neutral, 25%, and not really, just 3%.
Well, I guess that's a good sign. You're in the right place for this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabi. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about kind of the savings roadmap that typically comes when you move to kind of a nearshore operation. So as Eric alluded to before, it's not just about labor arbitrage, right? That's table stakes, right? You're, by definition, by moving to a nearshore and offshore location, you're going to get significant savings in just from the differences in salaries from the U.S. versus Latin America or another location. But when done right, there's other benefits that go beyond just straight up labor savings, right? So typically, you use kind of the migration to a BPO provider as an opportunity to do some organizational restructuring. So, whether you're bringing, operations that were typically operated out of different areas and consolidating and centralizing, whether you're taking the opportunity to standardize kind of roles and functions to standardize the processes, or just addressing the span of control, right? Moving to, kind of a larger ratio of employees to supervisors, right? Typically there's 10 to 20% of additional savings that come just from restructuring kind of the organization as part of the move. And then the longer term benefits that come with it, particularly, if you choose the right sort of provider, there's typically efficiencies that come, from running that operation. So, the BPO providers that are worth their salt, they'll typically bake, optimizations and automation and continuous improvement programs into the operation. So over time, not only do you get the kind of initial savings from the labor arbitrage on the restructuring, but you're able to deliver year over year efficiency savings to either reduce fees or to allow the operation to scale with your growth that comes along. And then just to give a little bit of insight into kind of the typical savings expected within AP. So this is off of a very recent Robert Half study, looking at kind of the range of savings from the various AP positions. So the average savings versus the US within Costa Rica for the different roles ranges from 35 to 40%. If you look at the dollar cost, right, if you consider not only just the cost of the salary, but the fully loaded cost, including benefits, taxes, fixed overhead for the space that they occupy in the building and kind of the equipment that they use and all of that, the savings range from 21 to 30,000 a head. So in line with that 35 to 40% savings, and that's on average, right? If you look across different geographies, You know, some folks are in more expensive markets than others. So if you're in, you know, San Francisco or Boston or New York, you know, those markets tend to be more expensive, not only from the cost of the labor, but from the cost of the facilities and those sorts of things. So those markets tend to skew even higher than kind of the average. So definitely, certainly there's opportunities to get pretty good labor arbitrage by moving to this model.
So let's shift to how do you identify the opportunities within your organization, and then we'll talk about what you can do about it. So to me, it starts with just the general benchmarking of the organization itself. And the first question you want to ask yourself is, what's the right level of benchmarking performance? Where do you want to be? And so naturally, what most people think is they want to be at a top performer. That's the goal of where you want to get to. But let's look at what the characteristics of a top performer are to see if that's even a realistic level of attainment. So typically for a top performer organization, they're going to have consolidated, centralized, and standardized business processes and systems. This limits the number of transaction variations and exceptions. There's simplified business rules, which also allows you to have limited exceptions. And there's automation solutions in place that reduces the amount of manual work that's being performed. So if this sounds like your organization today, great, then top performer is where you should be. But if it's not where you, kind of fit into that profile, you're likely somewhere between bottom and median. And I think medium is where you want to target. You know, it's still going to be an improvement, and it still makes a lot of sense. And yes, a longer term goal could be top, but it's not necessarily something that, you know, they talk about, you know, eating the elephant one bite at a time. You want to start and get some improvements before you really focus on, you know, just trying to get to the end result that you would ultimately like to be at. So let's talk about how do you identify opportunities and what the metrics are that drive that. So there's usually two types of metrics that we review. One is about efficiency and one is about effectiveness. So efficiency typically has to do with either the number of people in the organization performing a task or the productivity levels of those people who are doing it. Effectiveness is more about the cost or the accuracy and quality of the work being performed. So as you can see, there's a lot of ranges across these different spectrums from bottom to median to top. So let's look at the number of FTEs in an AP organization. This is based on $1 billion revenue organization. So you can see a broad range. A top performer has a little over 3 FTEs, a bottom performer just about 15, and a medium somewhere in the middle. So big ranges. So if you see yourself sitting at that bottom level, what does this tell you is that you have an opportunity. You can literally quantify the amount of cost savings that you can drive by bringing your headcount from one level to another. And then how do you get there? Well, you look at the statistic to the right, it talks about the number of invoices processed per FTE, and you can see it's almost 4 times more invoices processed per FTE by a top performer than a bottom, double that of a median. So clearly, if you're at that bottom level, it's telling you there are opportunities which you can likely achieve through things like automation, through intelligent data capture and OCR, through workflow, lots of different solutions. But this, what the benchmarks do is they give you the guidance on that. Now, if you're looking at effectiveness, it's going to be about cost, but now you can start to quantify what the benefits are. So literally, if you're going from a bottom to a medium to a top performer, there's a $500,000 difference from the bottom level to the top level in annual cost savings. So it allows you to make investments in the area itself, because you know that return on investment should be pretty significant, and the return on investment should be able to be achieved in a reasonable time frame, generally less than 12 months. You know, there are lots of metrics you can look at. These are some examples. Here's some others, and you know, there's other. I've had other webinars where I focused heavily on benchmarking and how to use it. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this here, but I wanted to point out that this is something that you should be doing in order to start to evaluate your organization itself and then decide where the opportunities are. These measures will be helpful to help you figure that out.
Thanks. And obviously, the focus here is on AP. So P2P, it's a really good place to start. That's where a lot of first-time outsourcers, they really kind of dip their toe in the water in terms of moving to an outsource model. Um, there are some folks that literally outsource the entire AP process, right, end to end. But there's other candidates within that I think are kind of more logical places to start if you're a first-time outsourcer. So things like vendor master data, indexing of invoices, invoice processing, payment preparations, vendor inquiries, statement reconciliations. Those functions, are typically pretty self-sufficient and can be outsourced fairly easily to an organization, regardless of the maturity of their processes. Some of the other ones where you look at, GL expense coding or three-way match, backlog exceptions management, those typically they can be outsourced and very often do get outsourced, but it takes a little bit more mature of an organization and more of a structured organization to be able to, understand the expense coding, to, understand the end-to-end process and have good relationships within the business to be able to fix some of the things that that cause some of those exceptions
Dan,
and those sorts of things.
one question that I got that just prompted my attention to this slide was travel and expenses processing. We don't necessarily have it here, but that's also typically part of the scope for outsourcing, and right?
Yeah, so T&E is definitely one that gets outsourced, and it can be anything from, processing the expense reports to doing the audits of the expense reports to, kind of preparing payments and kind of issuing, also managing kind of the credit cards and that sort of stuff. So yeah, T&E, while it's not core AP, a lot of times those functions sit together within an organization and are kind of managed together up through the same manager or director. But thank you, good question.
Thank you.
And then, so to move from AP, there's outsourcing, but then you might also ask yourself, hey, why not just automate, right? So there's a large landscape of AP automation tools that are available, but even if you try and go to full automation, it's, most AP departments are not mature enough, or operating with the right level of process discipline and process standardization to deliver full automation. So a lot of times when you move to these sorts of tools, and I'll go into it a little bit more in my following slides, there's still a manual component that doesn't go away and ends up coming back to the AP team. So kind of the punchline to all of that is, the ideal outsourcing partner, if you bring them in, you need to make sure that they've got the functional expertise, the ability to understand automation and the tools to bring in automation to not only perform the work, but to optimize the entire AP cycle as you need it. So I wanted to just quickly talk about kind of the various models of outsourcing specific to AP. So I like to think of it as kind of two different service models. The first one I'd call platform dependent model. These are typically really driven by software, and then they offer processing or payment services as a complement to the software. So, Bill.com, Nexus, Tapulti, Concur, there's a whole slew of competing solutions out there. And then the other style is more turnkey outsourcing model. So these are typically, driven by a BPO provider that manages the function within the client's environment, and then they deliver add-on tools to drive the same sort of efficiencies that you could get out of the software platform. So two different styles. The platform dependent models, they typically work better for early stage and small to mid-size AP organizations that might not be as mature or as strong in the processes, and they need better tools because either the quality of their ERP or kind of the maturity of their organization to manage the process a little bit better. The software typically has some level of automation and workflow native to the product, and they have the ability to add on vendor portals and some of those things to drive more self-service. There's a large suite of providers out there, and it's really important that if you go that route, that you choose the provider that fits not only your level of maturity and the volumes that you have now, but also kind of the growth and complexity of your organization. The downside to that model is, the exceptions are still going to come back to your team. Typically, behind the scenes, the processing services are managed by a combination of automation and shared resources. So when it comes to managing issues and customer services, you don't have the call it one throat to choke style of having kind of a dedicated team or a dedicated person within your outsourcing organization to manage that. The other challenge with some of those is as you give up a little bit of flexibility, right? Because you have to tailor your processes to fit kind of a standard service. But then as your volume grows, a lot of times we see that these services become a lot more costly once you begin to scale. As you're paying, kind of an ongoing cost per transaction to manage that. On the turnkey model, you typically have a dedicated team. You've got the provider works within your environment, but typically brings in, a suite of tools that they use across their clients. So they end up being priced a little bit more reasonably. And they have the ability to scale a little bit quicker and pass those savings and efficiencies on as your business continues to grow. It's definitely better suited for kind of higher volume organizations. The cons of that is, it's not an out of the box solution. So it's going to take a little bit to stand it up and get it, customized to your organization, which is good and bad. And then depending on the provider you use, there's typically deal size minimums, and they vary by the different providers. So, you may not be able to go this route if you're kind of a smaller organization. It might be difficult to find somebody willing to take on your work. The pricing models between the two different solutions, are different. In the platform models, there's typically an initial implementation cost, but then you also pay for ongoing software licensing fees because they're really dependent on you working within their environment to manage the AP work. And so along with that, typically they're cloud-based, so there's data storage and archiving costs related to maintaining your data, maintaining images of your invoices or your POs or that sort of thing. And as I said, it's typically a per unit transaction-based pricing, and you can pay for parts of services, right? So for master data or for processing, or if you want to move payments to them as well, depending on the provider, they can offer kind of a broader suite of services within AP. On the outsourcing side,
Sorry.
On the outsourcing side, there's typically an initial migration cost and then kind of a fixed fee for the ongoing services. And then typically you'll see optimization-based fee reductions in the out years that are either tied to reductions or allow you to hold cost as the operation scales. So what I wanted to do is, after describing the two models, I wanted to talk about kind of the third, which is kind of, give a quick example about how Auxis and a BPO provider can emulate some of the functionality that the software dependent models typically provide. So I'm not going to walk through the full workflow here in detail, but in this case, we're describing how we combine intelligent OCR, workflow, and RPA to automate the process. So the parts in green is really where the process starts with a tool that we use in our center called Effisoft, which is essentially monitoring the AP inbox and using kind of intelligent OCR to distinguish between, you know, invoices from other sorts of things that come into the inbox, you know, vendor requests, statement requests, those sorts of things. So Effisoft uses kind of its monitoring and imaging to, you know, to read the invoice and to pull the data off of that. And it basically gets picked up by UiPath and enters kind of that indexed information into the document management system. You know, Box then is the document management system, which grabs and creates workflow to route the invoice for approval, to you know, route it for coding, all of that sort of stuff. And then ultimately, once it's routed and approved, you know, the robot, in this case, we use UiPath as our RPA solution, picks up the invoice, processes it, performs the three-way match, and then if there's any sort of exception during the processing, you know, we've automated a lot of the common exceptions. Those that haven't been automated get kicked over to a processor for manual handling of the exception. So it's another way to perform the outsourced service, and you know, it's an example of how, you know, without having our, you know, our standard tool, we can bring in the various tools from our suite to approximate the same functionality as some of the AP software out there.
And I think that like one of the considerations that is also important is that a lot of these tools can be combined with our clients' existing environment, right? Like they may
Yeah.
already have another document imaging system or workflow system instead of Box, but they still use Effisoft up front, and then they use their own workflow system.
Yeah, and that comes
Mhm.
back to, you know, finding a provider that has the tools but really understands the full end-to-end process to know where are the gaps in your system stack, and knowing how to bring in tools and change processes to drive greater efficiencies.
Right, and have the flexibility to use their own systems in case that that's not something that they want to change. And then in terms of UiPath and RPA, another great advantage that we're seeing is that because of the type of technology, you can use it not only within your AP function, you can really apply it across accounts receivable or record to report, or even functions outside finance, as long as they have specific characteristics. So you can really dilute the cost of that software investment on UiPath across the whole organization.
Yep, agreed. And so
Awesome.
next
With
polling
the
question, Fabi.
Yes, so the next polling question, it's actually about what automation tools have you implemented so far, if any, and you can select more than one. So the first one would be OCR and intelligent data capture, self-service tools such as ticketing, vendor portals, or workflows. The third one is third-party service for invoice receipt indexing and processing. That would be very similar to what Dan presented in that slide on the left side, and then robotic process automation. So we're getting the responses, and I'll give it a couple of more seconds to capture more responses. All right. Closing the poll now and sharing it. So the one that has been more implemented is the self-service tools, whether they selected workflow or vendor, that's 56%. Then the second one is OCR with 33%. The third one is RPA, 30%, third-party service providers, 26%, and then 15% basically answer none.
Interesting. It seems like I'm actually surprised at some of the technologies that are already deployed out there. We're not seeing a lot of clients have a lot of these embedded in their organization, so it's good to see that the technologies are starting to emerge, you know, more so than we would have expected.
Okay, so I wanted to take a quick minute to talk through a few AP outsourcing success stories, that we've delivered. So, the first one is a global cosmetics manufacturer and distributor. So we designed for them a shared service model that supported multiple business units. That was a hybrid model with Auxis as the outsourcer. We implemented outsourcing in several areas, including AP, but also accounting and AR. Initially, the AP environment had really high backlogs and exceptions. It was characterized by late payments and a lot of vendors putting them on hold. We took on that work. We implemented multiple process improvements and automation to get control of the various fires. And that allowed us to really work with the global process owners to fix the upstream and downstream process issues. If you fast forward through the journey, we completely eliminated the processing backlog. We stood up a lot of um, Power BI analytics dashboards to get good visibility into the various parts of the process, to understand the processing metrics and to understand where the various bottlenecks were, and to give them visibility that they never had before in terms of the size of their liabilities and the aging of their AP, and kind of where processes were getting stopped as we were trying to flow through the process. Um, in terms of efficiency, huge productivity gains and improvements in process accuracy by addressing some of the backlog issues and the accuracy issues. Vendor inquiries dropped by almost 80%. So as that continues to happen, kind of these improvements start feeding themselves in a cycle. So as you get more efficient, you can process faster, you have better accuracy, which drives less inquiries, which frees everybody up to focus on fixing some of the upstream and downstream processes. So really great success story from a client that's been a client of ours now for 4 or 5 years. Another interesting story. So this is a fast-growing e-commerce retailer. Their their business is interesting because it actually boomed during the pandemic because they sell outdoor equipment. So as folks shuttered in place and disconnected from work and fled large cities, a lot of them moved to rural locations and participated in outdoor activities, which drove a boom to their business. They were in hyper growth before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like, putting growth on steroids, and they just couldn't keep up, right? They were having problems attracting talent, from the market where their AP process was. They had turnover issues as the teams were getting burned out, because they had so many open positions. And they had challenges with accuracy and efficiency of managing that, to the point where, the inability, AP was getting in the way of driving growth, right? As vendors would put them on hold, they didn't have product to distribute to continue growing their top line. So they came to us with a different proposition. Hey, we need to spin up a team quickly, right, to work almost as kind of a managed team underneath our AP group. So we bring the same sort of process discipline and thought leadership. The difference is, we brought a lot of bodies to help them scale to support kind of their hyper growth. When you fast forward, obviously there were cost savings from, doing that out of Costa Rica, but on top of that, there was improvements in process accuracy. And, it turned out that, the folks on our team, as we designed how teams were structured and moved to more specialized roles, where some folks focused on, indexing, others focused on processing, others focused on inquiries, we're able to get 25% productivity gains versus how the teams were structured in the US. And so by ramping up quickly and addressing the backlog, that freed up a lot of the vendor holds and was just a huge success story for them. So we continue to operate as an extension of their team, and then we also scale up now during peak seasons, when they know that they need additional resources to keep up with seasonal demands. And then the last story I want to share is really, it's a great story around automation and outsourcing combined. So this was a leading, hospital chain that, was pre-pandemic, had huge invoice volume. They were in the midst of an acquisition. They were having problems, attracting and retaining talent, and just their volume-driven organization. It was very difficult to staff to keep up with the volume. Throw on top of that, the company made a large acquisition that was, planning to double the amount of volume to be handled by the team. But, part of the deal, there were synergy targets where, there was an expectation that the current finance team would be able to absorb the incremental volume. So a really tough situation to be in. With this one, we actually implemented the workflow that I walked you through earlier, where we combined, intelligent automation and workflow and RPA to handle a lot of the volume. And essentially, we got to about 80% of the AP processes, of the AP invoices processed are touchless, based on that process that I walked you through previously. If you turn that into kind of a reduction in backlog, they typically operated with about 4 days of backlog in terms of what was building up behind them, and that was reduced to 4 hours. So certainly, huge savings from an efficiency, and we manage all those bots from our center. Excuse me, Costa Rica.
Thank you. And I think, Eric, since because of the essence of time, maybe we can jump into the lessons learned and walk a
Sure.
little bit through the assessment. Yep.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what some of the key lessons learned that we've seen over the years in terms of how to make a successful outsourcing migration, particularly focusing on the AP process. So it starts with executive alignment and transparency with the team and the key stakeholders. So remember, AP is not just AP. There's departments that have a lot of interaction with it, whether it's purchasing, whether it's receiving, whether it's in the departments themselves where they're dealing with suppliers and having expectations of invoices being processed and goods being received. So there needs to be a very strong alignment across the organization that this change is taking place. Another thing that's important is, just the ability to really truly capture the entire process and understand what's going on, because AP, we've talked about, has lots of challenges within it, with exceptions and processing variations, etc. So if you're just looking at what we like to call the happy path, that's not going to really help solve your problems, because that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is what you need to be aware of and develop solutions for. So you need a provider who's able to understand the full life cycle of AP and understand what happens outside of that happy path, and then have good solutions around that. That's why having the subject matter expertise is important, but it's also about why having ability to bring in some of these other tools that we've talked about is important, so that you can deliver not just the basics, but all of the efficiency gains that we've discussed. And then having that communication and collaboration across the enterprise. Again, as we talked about, sometimes you got to go outside of the AP department and into the organization itself. Having that good communication and collaboration is key. And then lastly, it's about having strong service levels and governance process, understanding what's going on in the organization, having the KPIs measure performance and identify where things are happening, so that that there's a clear visibility to challenges, and that once you have identified a challenge, you discuss it, address it, and solution it. These are the keys that I think make this program very successful, and something that really requires a great partnership between the client organization and its outsourcing provider.
Awesome. And I know we still have some questions, and we can stay for like 5 more minutes for those that are interested in us, answering some of the questions. But before we leave, One of the things that we are realizing from your answers is that a lot of you are in a very early exploratory stage of what outsourcing could mean to you. Would outsourcing even make sense? You know, sometimes it's not the answer for everyone. Sometimes it's outsourcing with automation. Sometimes it may just be automation, the right answer for your company. So one of the things that we have found super helpful for other clients is to go through this quick complementary exercise and assessment where we have some sessions and we send you some data gathering to better understand, you know, your existing organization, your volume of invoices, your existing system environment. And based on all of those components, we help you identify key opportunities for efficiencies and keep you, you know, help you confirm the feasibility of what outsourcing could look like in your organization, what would be the potential business case of that model. And as we find opportunities for automation, we would help, you know, at a high level quantify what those additional savings could be. So this exercise is, you know, it's a quick exercise, should take us between 1 to 2 weeks to do. I know we are already in active conversations with a lot of you, but for those that we haven't necessarily had that connection, I highly suggest that you take the opportunity to get this schedule. So if you're interested, you can, you know, reach out to my email. And then for those that, you know, are just interested in getting that schedule now, I'm gonna launch a polling question and you can leave your answers here. And Eric, a couple of the questions that I had is, some of the people joining, they already have a nearshore model that is internal, where they may have their captive operation in Colombia or in Mexico, but they still felt interested in the topic because they're still getting the same challenges, but they're asking about what would be the cost savings in their case if they are already in a low cost market. So what would you say to those people?
I mean, for those organizations, if you've already made the move to a low cost market, it's not going to be about labor arbitrage. Now what it's going to be about is optimization. So typically what we've seen is if we look at the current operation itself, and we look at how, you know, the volumes of transactions and what's flowing through the organization, it's where we start to identify the benefits of those initiatives of bringing in automation, of intelligent data capture, and some of the other solutions we've talked about. So you're likely going to get your benefit from an optimized approach, all about automation as opposed to process, you know, just labor arbitrage, because that's not going to be the answer for you simply because you're already in that low cost market.
Thank you. And then the question around T&E was about, you know, this company, they're experiencing even more inefficiencies and challenges in T&E versus in their vendor P2P process. And they were asking if that was something that we see a lot out there and what would be our perspective on that.
T&E is, I mean, it tends not to be a huge problem area. So I really have to understand how the process works today and what the challenges are, where the issues are, to basically address that more directly. You know, but you know, very often there's solutions that are pretty readily available that plug into existing platforms that help you manage it. But if it's a purely manual process, you know, then it's going to be about, you know, putting the right controls in place, putting the right visibility in place, because often what's the issue? The issue is somebody's putting in an expense report that's not in compliance with, you know, with existing rules, or you know, an expense report is sitting out somewhere waiting for somebody's approval and not getting done. So you need to have some governance around that and put some controls in place to make sure that the, you know, the right people are looking at the right things at the right time to solve that issue.
Thank you. And the last question, with this I'll close. So there's a company that is actually going through a carve out. Okay, and they are looking into outsourcing as a way to support the new carve out, but they don't necessarily know exactly what are the volumes of their part of the company. So how would you suggest to go about scoping that?
So if you, and I've done this with a number of different clients. We work, for example, with a number of private equity firms where they're carving out a business from within a business, and you have to figure out a solution for that. It's still about the same type of volumes. So you might need to dig into what the volumes are currently across the current business, and then see if you can create a subset around that of transactions that are part of that a part of that carve out piece of the business. Generally, that should be identifiable. If it's not, if it's, you know, something that, you know, just everything bleeds together, you know, then it becomes a, you know, an educated guessing game. Let's put it that way, where you want to have somebody who's going to give you basics of what you think it is, and then build a model around that. At the end of the day, it's about building the right model, but also being flexible enough to adjust that model if you find that the volumes are different than what you've expected, because you really want to have the right mix of volumes and headcount to support it, and the right levels of people who are doing the jobs.
Yeah, and typically in those situations, there's usually some sort of temporary transaction service agreement between the company that you're getting carved out of, which they're kind of charging back to the company that's being carved out. So while you may not have visibility to the volumes up front prior to the carve out, they typically try and get visibility post carve out because they use that to bill back for the price. You know, and obviously kind of as the outsourcer that catches the work, you know, our goal is really to get visibility so that we can understand the staffing model and the complexity of the work to continue to support that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys, for helping with the responses. And thank you for those that stayed a little bit longer. As I mentioned on the chat, for those interested in getting a copy of the presentation, you can send me an email. I have already seen some of your requests, so I'll be sending you the presentation shortly. And I think with that, we will be done. And also we have a lot of materials, and I'm gonna be putting with my team a consolidated list of some of the blogs and the benchmarking white papers that we have. So you can take a look at those, and we'll be also sending some follow-ups on that, because there's some interesting materials. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. And thank you, Dan and Eric, for such an informative session. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate your time today. Take care.